free MVP. When you look back at the season from hell that the Fever had, none of us expected them to be in this situation. None of us expected them to be winning a very close Game 3.
What if I told you Caitlin Clark might actually suit up for the WNBA Finals? I know it sounds impossible, right? For weeks, we've been told her season is done, that the groin injury has kept her out and there's no way back. But now, thanks to a little-known rule in the WNBA, a real pathway might exist for Clark to return to the court if the Fever make the finals. Imagine the biggest star in women's basketball stepping back onto the floor on the league's biggest stage. That's the kind of twist that could change everything. But here's the thing, it's complicated. The rules, the risks, the roster moves, it's all tied together. And while some people believe it's a complete long shot, others are convinced this loophole was made for a situation exactly like this. Today, we're going to break it all down. What the rule actually says, why the Fever left themselves an opening, and what Clark's return could mean for Indiana's shot at a championship. Let's start with the basics. The Indiana Fever weren't supposed to be here. At the beginning of the season, most analysts didn't even have them making the playoffs. The roster looked young, banged up, and inconsistent. Then Caitlin Clark went down, and it felt like their season was over. But instead of folding, the Fever fought their way into the semifinals and now stand just one step away from the finals. Think about what that means. Aaliyah Boston has embraced a bigger role. Kelsey Mitchell has been on fire, and veterans like Natasha Howard and Odyssey Sims have given this team a steadying presence. Even Sophie Cunningham, who many thought wouldn't be a major factor, has provided energy and toughness on both ends of the floor. This group has become the definition of resilience. When you see a team win games, they have no business winning. It makes you wonder what happens if they get their superstar back. And that's the buzz around Indiana right now. Fans are asking, if the Fever can battle this far without Caitlin Clark, what could they do with her? The answer could be scary. Because with Clark in the lineup, Indiana's ceiling doesn't just go up, it explodes. That's why this whole conversation about her possible return is so fascinating. Now let's back up and revisit why we're even here. Caitlin Clark hasn't played since suffering a groin injury that forced her out of action weeks ago. At the time, the Fever announced she would miss the rest of the regular season, and most people assumed that meant the playoffs too. Groin injuries are tricky. Sometimes they heal quickly, sometimes they linger. Clark only played around 13 games this year, which is shocking considering how much hype surrounded her debut. She was expected to take the league by storm, and for a while she did. The Fever were selling out arenas, breaking TV ratings, and suddenly becoming the must-watch team in the WNBA. Then the injury hit, and everything came crashing down. But here's the interesting part. Groin injuries usually range from 2 to 6 weeks of recovery, depending on severity. We're now well beyond that timeline. Clark has had time to heal, time to train, and possibly even time to prepare behind the scenes. Which raises the obvious question, if she's feeling healthy enough, why not bring her back? This is where the conversation shifts from health to rules. Because as much as Clark might want to return, it's not just about whether her body is ready. It's about whether the WNBA allows it. And that's where things get really complicated. Here's where it gets interesting. Under normal WNBA rules, once playoff rosters are submitted at the end of the regular season, they're locked. No more hardship signings, no more 7-day contracts, no bringing in free agents off the street. What you submit is what you've got, but there's a catch. The WNBA has a clause that allows teams to activate players who are already under contract, but listed as inactive. That means players on maternity leave, suspension, or the injury list can technically be moved onto the active playoff roster if a spot opens due to injury. And guess what? Caitlin Clark fits into that category. She's not some random free agent. She's signed, she's under contract, and she's part of the Fever organization. That's why people are buzzing. Technically, the Fever could activate her if another player gets hurt, or if the league grants an exception. Now, before we get carried away, understand this. Exceptions are rare. The league doesn't hand them out lightly. But the fact that the language exists means this isn't just some wild fantasy. There's a legitimate pathway for Caitlin Clark to return in the finals, even though the roster deadline has already passed. That's the twist in this whole situation. So why does this loophole matter so much? Because it shows that Caitlin Clark's season might not be completely over. Most fans assumed the injury announcement was final. but the CBA provides that slim chance if you're under contract, you're never fully ruled out. The key difference here is between being on the active playoff roster versus being under team control. A player who's injured can stay on the inactive list and still technically be eligible for activation if certain conditions are met. This is unlike hardship or emergency contracts, which end when the regular season ends. What makes it even more intriguing is how rare it is for this clause to even come up. Very few players of Clark's caliber have ever been in this position, signed, injured, but potentially able to return at the highest stakes. It's the type of situation that forces coaches, executives, and even the league itself to think long and hard. If Clark really can play, does the Fever pull the trigger? Do they risk messing with team chemistry? Or do they stick with the roster that got them here? That's why this loophole isn't just a legal technicality. It's a decision that could rewrite the end of the season. Now, let's talk about the gamble. Bringing back a player after a long injury layoff is never easy. The risks are obvious. Caitlin Clark might not be in game shape, she could re-injure herself, and her presence could disrupt the rhythm of a team that's finally clicking. Chemistry is delicate, and playoff basketball is not the time to experiment. But here's the other side. Even a 60% version of Caitlin Clark is still one of the most dangerous players in the league. Her shooting stretches defenses, her vision creates opportunities, and her competitive fire lifts everyone around her. That kind of impact doesn't just help, it transforms. The reward here is massive. With Clark on the floor, the Fever suddenly have a puncher's chance against anyone, even the defending champion Aces. She forces opponents to rethink their game plans, adjust matchups, and respect Indiana in ways they might not otherwise. The question is whether the Fever are willing to take that risk. Do they gamble on their franchise player for a chance at history, or do they play it safe and protect her long-term health? It's the classic dilemma, short-term glory versus long-term security. And for a team this close to the finals, it's a brutally tough call. Here's the part that raised eyebrows. The Indiana Fever only submitted 11 players for their playoff roster. That's unusual, because teams are allowed to carry 12. Why would they leave a spot open? Some believe this was a calculated move. By leaving the 12th spot unfilled, the Fever may have given themselves flexibility, maybe even intentionally keeping the door cracked open for Clark's return. After all, if they had no plans whatsoever, why not just fill the roster with another depth piece? Instead, they rolled into the playoffs with fewer bodies, betting on the strength of the group they had. And that makes you wonder, did the front office quietly leave that spot for Caitlin? Now, officially, the team hasn't said anything, but the decision is suspicious enough to fuel speculation. The idea that Indiana would knowingly go short-handed unless they had a bigger plan is worth thinking about. Because if Clark really does have a path back, then that open roster slot might be the clue everyone missed. And if the Fever shock the league and reach the finals, it's going to look like one of the boldest strategic choices in recent WNBA history. Let's get real for a second. Even if the rules allow it, the biggest question is whether Caitlin Clark is physically ready to return. Injuries don't just heal overnight, and playoff basketball is a completely different intensity. Reports have suggested she hasn't been practicing full speed with the team during this run. That means her conditioning might not be where it needs to be, and playoff minutes would test her body right away. The risk of re-injury is significant if she rushes back too soon. But on the flip side, Caitlin Clark is a competitor unlike anyone else. She thrives under pressure, and she's built for big moments. Even if she hasn't been in full practices, you know she's been training, rehabbing, and preparing behind the scenes. If there's even a sliver of a chance she can play, she's going to push for it. The Fever have to weigh all of that. Is she sharp enough? Is she strong enough? Can she step into the finals and actually help rather than hurt the team's chances? If the answer is yes, then Indiana could shock the world. If the answer is no, then this becomes one of the biggest what-ifs in WNBA history. Let's imagine for a second that Caitlin Clark does return for the finals. The entire matchup changes instantly. Against a powerhouse like the Las Vegas Aces, the Fever would suddenly have a weapon that forces the defense to stretch the floor. Without Clark, teams can pack the paint against Aaliyah Boston and dare Indiana's guards to shoot. With Clark, that game plan collapses. Her shooting range makes defenses scramble, opening up lanes for Boston, Mitchell, and Cunningham. Suddenly, the Fever's offense looks a lot more dangerous. Defensively, Clark isn't perfect, but her presence means Indiana can play faster, take more risks, and trust her ability to spark transition plays. She may not be at 100%, but her IQ and court vision are enough to swing possessions in the Fever's favor. And let's be honest, the hype alone would be massive. A finals with Caitlin Clark returning from injury? That's the kind of moment that transcends basketball. Fans would pack arenas, TV ratings would spike, and the entire sports world would turn its attention to the WNBA. For the Fever, this isn't just about X's and O's. It's about believing they can win it all. Here's another layer to this whole situation: the WNBA itself. Don't think for a second that the league office isn't paying attention. Caitlin Clark is the biggest star the WNBA has seen in years, and her presence directly affects business. Ticket sales, TV deals, sponsorships, you name it, she moves the needle. That puts the league in a tricky spot. On one hand, they want her healthy and safe. Rushing her back could put her long-term career at risk, and that's something they can't afford. On the other hand, the finals with Caitlin Clark is a dream scenario for ratings and exposure. Would the WNBA quietly approve her activation if it meant more fans tuning in? Possibly. Would they step in and shut it down if they thought the risk was too high? Also possible. Either way, this isn't just Indiana's decision, it could be a league-wide conversation. And that's why this situation is so unique. It's not just about basketball. It's about business, branding, and the future of the league. Which direction they lean might tell us a lot about what the WNBA values most in this critical moment. So let's bring this all together. Technically, Caitlin Clark could return for the WNBA Finals thanks to that little-known clause in the CBA. She's under contract, she's recovering, and the Fever left an open roster spot that keeps the possibility alive. But realistically, it's still a long shot. She hasn't practiced full speed, the risks are real, and the Fever might not want to jeopardize their future for one gamble. The league itself might even step in to make sure nothing reckless happens. Still, the fact that we're even having this conversation shows just how much Clark means to the WNBA. Her presence alone changes everything from the way defenses line up to the way fans pack arenas. If she does come back, it would be one of the most dramatic returns in league history. If she doesn't, the Fever will still walk away proud, knowing they fought their way to the finals without her. So here's the question for you. If you were the Fever, would you risk it? Would you bring Caitlin Clark back, even at less than 100% for a chance at history? Let me know what you think. And as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more breakdowns just like this one.